morning. This is Apostle John Welty with Second Eighth Week Ministries, and today is Sunday. It's January 15th of 2012, and I'm coming to you from Walford, Iowa in the United States. So we're going to go ahead and pick up here where we left off before in 2 Peter chapter 2, beginning around verse 4. So let me go back and read into this a little bit, just to put us back into context. In 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4, he was bringing about a chief apostle Peter, okay, who was an apostle of Jesus Christ. Okay, he identified himself in both this epistle and First and 2 Peter 1 as being an apostle of Jesus Christ. Okay, no longer confirming the covenant of Moses, so he's making a distinction. Okay, confirming the covenant of Jesus Christ. He's teaching, okay, and expounding upon this mystery of Christ. Okay, that which was concealed, okay, has now been revealed. Okay, through the stewardship of this knowledge, which was coming through living apostles, as it continues to do so today. Okay, that by this knowledge you may know him in truth, and you may worship him in spirit and in truth. Okay, through the fellowship of this knowledge. Okay, which is why we see in the book of Acts that the commandments, okay, were given by Jesus to his apostles in order to give to the church, which we see Apostle John confirms that in his epistle. Okay, that which was made known to us, we make known to you, okay, that your joy may be full. There's purpose to the sharing of this knowledge, and that this knowledge, okay, must remain whole. Okay, nothing added, nothing taken away, because the knowledge of Christ is perfect. Okay, it's complete. There's nothing lacking. Nothing needs to be added to it. Okay, and there was no fluff. Okay, there's nothing to be removed. There's nothing that's not important for your faith. Okay. And yet we see that many have now gone and added to the gospel of Jesus Christ and taken away from the gospel of Jesus Christ. Okay, so that people see no need for apostolic stewardship. We see people that see no need for the prayer language of tongues, okay, which is the primary tool of the priesthood. We see people who have no understanding of the spiritual priesthood of Jesus Christ. Okay, he is the chief cornerstone. Okay, and he is the altar at which we are to serve him through the spiritual priesthood. Prophesied by Moses that it'd be a nation of priests. Okay, it's fulfilled in Jesus Christ, and yet we see people that are completely ignorant of that. Okay, well, that knowledge has to be made known and has to be embraced, okay, by the righteous, because it's through this knowledge that we are cleansed from false knowledge, false doctrines, okay, from heresies. Okay, which is what we see Apostle Peter addressing here in chapter 2, 2 Peter chapter 2 here, where he begins by saying that there were false prophets among the people, okay, even as there shall be false teachers among you. Okay, he was warning them of the coming time of darkness. Okay, we are now at the end of that time of darkness. We're coming out of that. Okay, this was the first eighth week with Jesus' ministry, okay, and the birth and the beginning of the church. Okay, and then there was the sixth week of darkness. Okay, this has to do with the weeks of Enoch. Okay, Enoch was the one you read about him in Genesis. Okay, that he walked with God and he was not because God took him. Okay, he was the first rapture there, and we and Enoch was not just raptured. He was caught up to heaven, and he was shown great mysteries, okay, which he was allowed to record. Okay, he returned to share these things, okay, which writings we still have today. And then he was caught up again, okay, back to God. But first he was allowed to share these things, okay. And one of the things that he was shown, okay, and recorded had to do with the weeks, okay. And the eighth week is split into two. Okay, and there's Apostle Eric has a nice video on that. I just shared a link to it on my Facebook page. You can see it on his YouTube page, on his Facebook page, and it talks about these weeks. Okay, but the eighth week is split into two. There's the first eighth week, okay, and then there should be a second eighth week. Okay, and this is this first and second eighth week actually bookmark, okay, they're at each end, okay, of the sixth week. Between these two is a week of darkness called the sixth week, okay, and the apostles understood this, and this is what they were warning the people about, okay, that this had to come, because the second eighth week wasn't going to happen until after the 6th week unfolded. So there was going to be this period of darkness, okay, of gross darkness, twofold darkness, okay, that through false prophets and false teachers, okay, there would be much confusion sown, okay, where people would become very, very, very confused, okay, as concerning faith in Christ. Okay, this is now, God is restoring truth again through apostolic stewardship in this time now, which is the second 8th week, okay, in preparation for the rapture of the church, okay, and the beginning of the week of tribulation. Okay, so we have to understand the weeks, okay, we have to understand the covenants and rightly divide the scriptures. Okay, and Apostle Peter here was writing to those whom he had instructed in this knowledge as concerning the plan of God. They understood the weeks. Okay, they knew what he was talking about. Okay, that knowledge has to be restored, and it is being restored today. Okay, through apostolic stewardship, through living apostles of the second 8th week. So what he's talking about here, okay, the false prophets in 2 Peter chapter 2, let's read into this here. 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 1, he says, "But there were false prophets also among the people, even as there shall be false teachers among you, who privily shall bring in damnable heresies, okay, even denying the Lord that bought them, and bring upon themselves swift destruction." Okay, they're turning truth into a lie. Right? They're serving their belly. They're worshiping their own feelings, okay, and their own intellect. Okay, instead of the spirit and the soul of man being governed by grace and truth, okay, they're being given over to uh, the powers of this world, okay, which keep them tethered to the soil, okay, and keep them in a state of confusion and derision. In verse 2 he goes on, "And many shall follow their pernicious ways, okay, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be even spoken of." All right, so that they will be they will be setting a policy for faith which is strange to God, okay, but that people will be embracing, okay, and that they will even see no need for truth, because we talked about this last time. Truth restricts the imagination. Okay, when faith is governed by grace and truth, okay, we have to put to death the principle of the aspiration, and the imagination has to be brought within the boundaries of truth, okay, because truth sets the boundaries. Okay, you can't imagine anything you want to as concerning God when truth is present. Okay, because God says, "This is who I am. Right? This is my plan. Okay, this is the mystery of Christ." You can't just decide what it's going to be for yourself when truth is present. So what happens is that people who want to embrace a lie speak evil of truth, because truth challenges that lie. Okay, therefore they fight against truth, don't they? Okay, because they don't want the knowledge that they're embracing. They don't want their version of Christ to be challenged, okay, by the revelation knowledge of God. Therefore, they will speak evil against his stewardship. They'll speak evil against his grace and his truth. Okay, and they will actually try to say that they are doing the will of God even when they're resisting. Now, can you ask yourself, how could that be? That sounds, how's that even possible? Well, think about the Pharisees and the Sadducees were doing the exact same thing. Okay, they were saying that Jesus was of the devil. Okay, God Himself sharing with them as concerning, okay, His plan, okay, as concerning the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is at hand, okay, and He was making these things known to them. Okay, they wanted to put Him to death, and they used the law of Moses to put Jesus Christ to death. Okay, same thing. They still do the same thing today. They're working with another spirit. Okay, it's not the Holy Spirit. Okay, they're working with another spirit. It's an earthbound spirit. It's an unclean spirit. Okay, which will work with the lie. Okay, if you choose to embrace the lie, okay, God will give you over to unclean spirits. Okay, who will be more than happy, okay, to work with that false knowledge. Okay, but His Holy Spirit will not work with that knowledge. Okay, you will not experience regeneration. You will not experience the renewing of the mind. Your spirit and your soul will not be governed by His grace and truth, and you will not bear forth the fruit of His Spirit within the soul. You may see, okay, that there's a bunch of other people that want to join you. You may see that you're able to gather for yourself a whole lot of people that want to listen to you. You may see people that want to send their money to you, okay, you may see an awful lot of confirmation from man, but you will not see a witness from God. And God will not bear witness to that. And you will not experience the promise of Christ. So let's go on here. In verse 3, he says, "And through covetousness shall they with feigned words make merchandise of you, whose judgment now of a long time lingers not, and their damnation slumbers not." And we talked about that last week there at the end. Okay, when it says judgment now of a long time, okay, remember I said to draw a line from that down to verse 9, okay, that reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. Okay, which has to do with the fact that their judgment, okay, which has been assigned to them, okay, has not yet been carried out. Okay, it's like when an arrest warrant has been issued for somebody, okay, and yet they're still walking. They might be shopping at the grocery store, okay, but the judgment has begun. Right, the arrest warrant has been issued, and even though they're still free to go about and do what they want to, okay, it's a matter of time before the issuance of the arrest warrant and the actuality of them being arrested, okay, takes place. Okay, so there's a delay, isn't there? Okay, well, in the meantime, they don't see that they're at any risk of being captured. Okay, so there's that delay. Well, you can imagine that that person might feel pretty confident, okay, that they can, they're free to move about, they're free to do what they want to, um, you know, and they start to get very confident and bold, okay, and careless in their actions, okay, because they feel like they're not, there's no consequence, okay, for their choices, right? Same type of thing, okay, until that judgment comes upon them. But it doesn't mean that it hasn't already been issued, does it? Okay, just because they're walking around freely right now doesn't mean that they have not already been judged. It's the same type of situation there. Okay, so he says their judgment of a long time. Okay, God has already judged their faithless activity. Okay, that they have chosen to refuse the record of Christ. Okay, and to set for themselves their own record, which is as concerning their own signature. It's in confirmation of themselves. Okay, they can see themselves in their doctrine. Okay, it reflects themselves. Why? Because it reflects its authorship. Okay, the doctrine of men will reflect the soil because it's coming from the heart of man. Okay, it will reflect that source. The doctrine of Christ does not. The doctrine of Christ reflects its source, which is from above. Okay, the source of life and light. Okay, not death and darkness. Okay, which is why the doctrines of men, okay, is focused upon what we call theistic law. Okay, it is ruled by the fear of lack. It is ruled, okay, by the fear of death. It is ruled by frailty. Okay, with the common condition of man finds himself in. Okay, seeking answers concerning trying to correct the state of frailty. The doctrine of men will revolve around that. The doctrine of Christ doesn't. Okay, because through the doctrine of Christ, which comes through apostolic stewardship, we understand, okay, the purpose of this time, the purpose of our hearts requiring testing. Okay, that the Lord has set about contradiction for the testing of our hearts. Okay, that He's asking, do you love me more than these? Okay, and He will allow the contradiction to exist in order for our faith to be tested, not in order to snare us, okay, not so that we would fall into destruction, okay, but so that our choices of faith could be rewarded with an increase of fruit, because He has designed His plan, okay, to increase His fruit in us through rewarding our choices of faith. Okay, there cannot be a reward or a choice of faith if there is no choice. Okay, there has to be a choice. Therefore, there has to be contradiction, which is why God created light and darkness. Okay, God created light and darkness. Satan didn't. Okay, God did. God allows the contradiction to exist. Okay, for a time being, for a purpose. Okay, you have to understand what that purpose is. You have to understand what the foundation of truth is, and how to serve God in spirit and in truth, so that you may benefit, okay, from choices of faith which are not offensive to God, okay, which do not work with the principle or the aspiration of man, okay, which are not transgressing the boundaries that He set for the covenant of Jesus Christ. Okay, the imagination will take you beyond the boundaries of the covenant, okay, causing you to transgress, okay, causing you to removing from you the reward of your choice of faith, okay, being increase of fruit bearing. Instead, okay, you will increase in the fruit of iniquity, okay, which brings corruption to the soul. Okay, corruption has to do with death entering. Okay, it's death working within the members. Okay, so death brings corruption. Okay, it's like take like a piece of fruit. Okay, when it starts to spoil, okay, it begins to collapse and rot, right, and from the inside out, and it may even look like a good apple for quite a while. Okay, I had an avocado the other day that was beyond its prime. Okay, but when you just looked at it, it looked really nice. Okay, and when you picked it up, it didn't feel that bad. It felt kind of soft, but then when I cut into it, it was, didn't want anything to do with it, so I threw it in the trash. Okay, this is the same thing as concerning the soul. Okay, so uh, the condition of the soul, okay, is concealed from the carnal eye. Okay, and yet it's not concealed from God. The condition of the soul must be um, uh, cleansed and healed, okay, and filled with the fruit of the Spirit of God, in order to be received back to God. Okay, when He opens up, okay, that vessel, okay, He's looking for the fruit of Christ, okay, the fruit of faith, which only takes place through the covenant of Jesus Christ. Okay, if He doesn't find that, then it's going to be quite offensive to Him. Okay, just like when I opened up that avocado, I was really disappointed because I was planning on making something with it, and so I threw it in the trash because it's worthless. Okay? It's lost any value. It's spoiled. It is corrupt. Okay, same thing with the soul. Okay, so if your soul is not brought, is not being kept in God's care, okay, which is something that we actively do by making application with the holy ordered knowledge of God. Okay, we do this. We make application with this knowledge by functioning in the priesthood. Okay, we are observing to do. There's a purpose for our study of the doctrine of Christ, is so that we may serve God without offense, that we may serve God, okay, working only with those things which He has sanctified for our use, okay, which are those things of the Spirit, the tools of the Spirit of God, okay, which are sanctified for our use in the covenant of Jesus Christ, not of Moses, but of Jesus Christ. Okay, the covenant of Moses is put away like a garment. Okay, it's no longer in effect. Okay, we are now only working with the tools of Jesus Christ. If you don't know what those things are, then you're at a great disadvantage. Okay, so you need to be instructed in that knowledge, okay, which is freely available. Okay, the God is revealing Jesus Christ now, so that all those of faith with an ear to hear, okay, may come to Him, okay, and put on His knowledge as a garment, okay, which through which we keep ourselves. It's the garment as concerning the priesthood of Jesus Christ. We serve Him, okay, within this knowledge. Okay, we serve Him with this knowledge and in this knowledge, okay, using the things of the Spirit, which is why Jesus said, "The times come now, that they that worship Me must worship in spirit and in truth." Okay, so let's go on here. We talked about that judgment of a long time. Okay, we're going to get into that a little bit further here. So let's look at verse 4. He says, "For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be reserved unto judgment, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them with an overthrow, making them an example unto those that should live ungodly, and delivered just Lot, vexed vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. Okay, for that righteous man dwelling among them, in seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds." Verse 9, "The Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptations, and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished." Verse 10, "But chiefly them that walk after the flesh, in the lust of uncleanness, and despise government. Presumptuous are they, self-willed, and they are not afraid to speak evil of dignities." Okay, so let's go into that a little bit further. Okay, so in verse 4, okay, so he says that he's talking about the angels that sinned. Now you'll notice a lot of similarities here between what Peter's sharing here in 2 Peter chapter 2, and also what Apostle Jude shared in his epistle. Okay, and they're both reflecting upon the writings of Enoch. Okay, which all of the apostles reflected upon. And we see here he's talking about the angels that sin. He's talking about the fallen watchers. Okay, these are the fallen watchers, which have to do with you'll read about that in Genesis, as concerning the sons of God, which took daughters of men, okay, and had children actually, okay, and Apostle, Enoch, okay, wrote quite a bit about that as concerning the fall of the Watchers, okay, and Chief Apostle Eric has got an entire series of expounding from those writings, if you're interested in that, which are very good, and I recommend them. And he says here, as concerning angels of sin, okay, those are the fallen watchers. They reasoned amongst themselves that God had not destroyed or bound Satan for his transgression. Okay, so they observed, okay, that Satan sinned, okay, in tempting Adam and Eve, right? Okay, in the garden. They observed that, okay, and yet God allowed Satan to continue to roam. Okay, and they're like, okay, well, it'd be like watching somebody that you know is doing something terribly wrong, okay, and then afterwards nothing happens to them, and you're like, wow, well, I guess it doesn't matter what you do. You can break the law and it doesn't matter. Like if you watch somebody drive through, a stoplight or something, okay, without even slowing down, you might think, wow, well, geez, okay, but as here in where we live now, okay, a couple weeks later, you're going to get a ticket in the mail from the traffic camera that didn't stop you right then, but it certainly catches up to you there. Okay, well, the same thing happened here with the fallen watchers. They observed that Satan, okay, was not destroyed or bound for his transgression, okay, and therefore they felt emboldened, okay, in transgressing themselves. Okay, sinners do the same thing in justifying themselves. It's a false justification. Okay, they are justifying themselves, but they're not justified by God. It's a false justification from God's perspective. Okay, even if you have others that agree with your false justification, okay, that does not bring justification from God, right? Okay, he's not a respecter of persons. So in justifying themselves by they're falsely viewing the long suffering of God, okay, as approval for their rebellion. So God is displaying long suffering, okay, which has to do with patience, endurance of contrariness. Okay, that God is displaying long suffering, and they're seeing that as approval for the rebellion. Okay, because He does not immediately stop the behavior. Okay, they see that as approval. That there's therefore nothing wrong with it, right? Because no one's stopping me, therefore it must be fine. Okay, that's that line of reasoning you see. Okay, the sinners taking. It's the same thing the fallen watchers did here. Okay, when he talks about the angels that sinned. All right. Okay, but when he talks here about their chains of darkness, he cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness. He's not talking about Satan. Okay, Satan is still in this atmosphere. Okay, he's talking about the fallen watchers. Okay, and like I said, you can read about those judgments in Enoch. You also see as concerning the opening of the pit. Okay, in the book of Revelation, right? Okay. Also here, being reserved has to do with until God uses them again. All right, so he cast them down, okay, and bound them in chains, and has reserved them until, okay, the time when they would be released, okay, which is actually going to be during the week of tribulation. So you don't want to be here for that. But let's go on here, and he says here as concerning judgment. Okay, they've been reserved to judgment. He's not talking about the great white throne judgment. Okay, he's it's a different judgment for these. But let's take a look at the same perspective. Okay, this is a really good psalm. Okay, for understanding this perspective. In Psalm 73, verses 1 through 19. Okay, Psalm 73, 1 through 19. And you'll notice that this is uh, a very common misconception people have. Okay, they become very confused by this. There's no need to. Okay, with truth, okay, when you reflect upon the knowledge of Christ in truth, okay, you continue to work with the Spirit of God, and you gain the perspective of the throne through the eyes of the Spirit. Okay, this is something that takes place when you're working with the grace and truth of God. Okay, it's not something that you do. You can't gain the perspective of the throne on your own because you don't have that perspective. Okay, you have the perspective of the soil, right? So for us to have the perspective of the throne, or having the mind of Christ, okay, we have to work with that which is from above. Okay, we have to work with the Spirit, okay, and the knowledge, okay, in grace and truth. Okay, these things are from above, and as we do so, God grants this perspective by His Spirit. Okay, this is something that God is issuing and manifesting, okay, for us, that we would have the perspective of the throne, having, okay, long discernment. Let's get into this a little bit. Psalm 73, verses 1 through 19. Just keep your thumb there in 2 Peter. We'll be coming back to that. But Psalm 73, 1 through 19, which reads, "Truly God is good to Israel, even to such as of our a clean heart. But as for me, my feet were almost gone. My steps had well nigh slipped. For I was envious at the foolish, when I saw the prosperity of the wicked." Okay, so he was observing, okay, that the wicked were prospering. Okay, that God was granting them plenty of rain for their crops, and they were doing really well, right? I mean, everything's they're prospering in everything that they endeavor to do. Okay, and God was not uh, frustrating their aspiration there, but allowing them to pursue these things and allowing them to prosper in these things, right? So this is he's observing that and envious of that, right? He says, "For there are no bands in their death, okay, but their strength is firm, and they are not in trouble as of other men, neither are they plagued like other men. Therefore pride compasses them about as a chain, and violence covers them as a garment. And their eyes stand out with fatness, and they have more than their heart could wish." Okay, so you're seeing great prosperity, okay, from those that have no fear of God. Okay, and they're becoming very bold and very boisterous, and as Peter brings out later here, who riot in the daytime. Okay, they have no fear of being discovered. They see nothing wrong with what they're doing. Verse 80 goes on, "They are corrupt, and they speak wickedly concerning oppression." Okay, they speak loftily. They set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongue walks through the earth. Okay, so they spread their philosophies. Okay, like all of the bookshelves are just filled with their writings. Okay, to try to teach others to do the same. You too can have this life, right? Verse 10 goes on. "Therefore, his people return hither, and waters of a full cup are wrung out to them. And they say, how does God know? And is there knowledge in the Most High?" Or in other words, is God blind? Does he not see this? Why is he letting this happen, right? Okay, so they're beginning to question God. Okay, same thing the fallen watchers did. They're like, does God not see what's going on here? Is God, he's letting this happen, maybe he's not as powerful as we thought he was, type of thing, right? Okay, so it's bringing about doubt and confusion. Verse 12, "Behold, these are the ungodly who prosper in the world. They increase in riches. Verily, I have cleansed my heart in vain, and washed my hands in innocency. For all the day long have I been plagued, and chastened every morning." Okay, so suffering great affliction and testing. Verse 15, "And if I say, I will speak thus, behold, I should offend against the generation of your children. When I thought to know this, it was too painful for me." Verse 17, okay, and this is the key here. He says, verse 17, "Until I went into the sanctuary of God, then I understood their end." Okay? uh, the same thing is concerning our worshiping God at the altar of Jesus Christ. Okay? Through our daily service to God at the altar, okay, we gain that long discernment. Okay? We gain the perspective of the throne. Okay? God is in control. God is allowing that contradiction to exist for a time for the testing of faith. Okay, verse 14, he goes on, "Surely you did set them in slippery places, and you cast them down into destruction. How are they brought into this desolation as in a moment? Okay? They are utterly consumed with terrors. Okay? Just as Peter's talking about here as concerning the sudden destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Okay, you see these things. So even though God allowed it to take place for a time, okay, it did not change, okay, the covenant of Moses, right? Same thing today. It does not change the covenant of Jesus Christ, right? So that even though there are many people, false teachers, false prophets, okay, who are drawing huge ministries to themselves, okay, they call them ministries, uh, but they, they draw a huge audience, okay, millions and millions of people, and huge television networks, right? Um, and people are giving them, multi-million dollars, right, in order to run all of these things, and buying their books and all that sort of stuff. So even though God's allowing that prosperity, okay, it does not take away from grace and truth, does it? It does not take away from the covenant of Jesus Christ. It doesn't change that. Okay, therefore the righteous must continue, right, to serve Him at His altar, and we have the having uh, the perspective of the throne of God. We know their end. Okay, we know their end. We know that they are not working with the Spirit of God. They are not bearing forth fruit within their soul. Okay, and the Lord will take offense at what He finds when He opens that vessel. Okay, when He opens that vessel, okay, He's going to see sin and death. And He's going to see love of self, despisers of government, okay, those the worshiping of creatures over God, okay. He's going to see the fruit of iniquity, okay, that they are confused by the mystery of iniquity, okay, because iniquity can cloak itself in false righteousness, okay, and they are following after that, so they feel very confident in what they're doing, um, and uh, and feel that they are a staple for the faith of the people, okay, and yet they're not directing faith into Christ, okay. Christ is to be the foundation of our faith, not them, okay, and yet they're setting themselves as a foundation for faith, using their own signature as a record for faith, okay, making merchandise of the people, as he said here, okay, and God is allowing that contradiction to exist for a time period, okay, but we know their end, okay, we know the coming of tribulation, okay, the week of tribulation, okay, we know that as the righteous, okay, who are bearing forth the fruit of the Spirit are caught up to God, as even as we are being caught up, okay, the wrath of God will be coming down, okay, beginning the seventh week of tribulation. We know that, okay, we know that when God reveals the contents of the souls, okay, that our souls will reveal the work of Christ, okay, the that God Himself will recognize the authenticity of His own work, okay, the fruit that He Himself has tended within our garden as the husbandman of our souls, okay, but they who profess to know God but never knew Him, okay, who were workers of iniquity instead because they forsook the covenant, okay, they forsook His government, they saw no need for truth, okay, and in fact they spoke evil against truth, okay, they while professing themselves to be wise and professing themselves to be clean and chaste, okay, were actually filled with the fruit of iniquity, which is a great offense to God, and they taught others to do the same, okay. It will not go well for them. So we understand their end. Same thing we see written here, okay, in Psalm 73, 1 through 19. Okay, so you can see that this is not anything new. God has always allowed this. You think about uh, the the land that the children of Israel, okay, entered into, okay, was flowing with milk and honey. Well, it was also filled with the wicked and sinners, right? Okay, so they were prospering, weren't they? Okay, the children of Israel were wandering in the wilderness, okay, who had been delivered out of Egypt, okay, and the wicked were prospering in the land, okay, so that there would be something for them to inherit. See that? Okay, so there's a purpose. Okay, so without truth, it can bring a great deal of confusion. Okay, and the the sanctuary of God, of course, is now within our hearts. Okay, as long as your heart's the having after having the Holy Spirit engrafted within the heart, okay, which is the first point of our sanctification, and having that foundation knowledge of truth laid within the soul, which has to do with the altar of Christ, okay, that foundation of truth. Uh, as we learn of the priesthood, we lay each stone of the altar within the heart, okay, and Christ sanctifies our faith in Him, Christ in us, and our faith in Him. Okay, this is what the Spirit of God works with. Now, each stone of the altar has to do with each element of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So, in verse 5 here, okay, he spared not the old world. Okay, having to do with he brought the flood to wipe out false knowledge. Okay, his long suffering was with restriction according to the fulfillment of his plan. Okay, so he spared not. Okay, um, and he talks about here saving Noah, the eighth person, in verse 5. Okay, that is a type and a shadow of the second eighth week. Okay, that type and shadow of the second eighth week. Okay, that he was being the eighth person. Okay, that Jesus was of the first eighth week, but now through the second eighth week, through the restoration of truth, okay, all those who enter into this ark of this knowledge, okay, being this covenant knowledge, okay, shall be delivered from the coming destruction. Okay, same thing. There's a type and a shadow there with Moses. Okay, being in, or not Moses, but it's concerning Noah. Okay, which had to do with he was the steward of the second week. Okay, and he was the eighth person, okay, on the ark. So that's the second and the eighth there. So there's a type and a shadow there. Um, and so also here is concerning the ungodly. Okay, when he says bringing the flood upon the world of the ungodly. Okay, again, he allowed that time of contradiction to exist. Okay, but there was to a point. Okay, he allowed it to exist for a purpose, for the testing of hearts. Okay, for the testing of faith. Okay, that the righteous would continue to serve him. Okay, leaning towards his counsel, working only with that knowledge which he had revealed. Okay, for faith, um, and yet the wicked would cast off his counsel. Okay, they would pursue the imaginations of their heart. Okay, they would be given over to the lust of the flesh, not working with the Spirit of God, but instead working with the unclean spirits of this world. Okay, but God allowed that to exist for a point until he brought destruction. The same thing will take place with the wicked tribulation. Okay, the sinners laugh at that. Okay, they make jokes about that. Okay, and yet they all know. Okay, that you know they seem to all be showing a fear. Okay, of the end of the world, don't they? Right? They're seeking out new planets that they think can sustain life. Okay, they're sending out satellites and building telescopes and that sort of stuff in order to try to seek out new planets which they feel can sustain other life. Okay, they're looking for signs of life on Mars. Okay, they're looking at colonizing the moon. All of these different things. Okay, because they fear the the end is near, right? Okay, and got a lot of people talking about that. They don't connect it to the judgment of God. They don't connect it to the plan of God, which has been made known, right? Because they want to reject God, and yet they still know, okay, that it's coming. So whether uh, you know, it's really interesting. Okay, but they mock at they mock when you bring out to them as concerning the judgment of God. Okay, but uh, uh, God does rule as sovereign over this over His creation. Okay, this dimension. Okay, God is in charge. God sets the policies. Okay, and God governs. Okay, over everything that takes place. And they, seeing that they can get away with anything they want to, feel like, well, obviously God's not, if He is around, He can't see very well, that type of thing. So they feel very emboldened in providing false justifications for themselves. Okay, but the judgment is at hand. Okay, now the righteous must continue to work with His holy knowledge, being baptized in the knowledge of Christ. Remember, as we brought that out before, is in Isaiah. Okay, that through his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many. Okay, speaking of Jesus Christ. Okay, this knowledge brings about justification, not false justification, but justification from God. Okay, because when your faith meets God's expectations, that's justified. Okay, it removes us from the condemnation of God. Okay, we are then free to serve God in righteousness. Okay, God removes barriers to faith, okay, so that we can continue to work with his grace and truth. Okay, not removing the testing or the contradiction, because it's through our cycles of growth that we bear forth fruit to God, which is pleasing to God. Okay, God delights in our overcoming, okay, by faith, but he frees us to continue in the faith. He frees us to show forth continuance in our confirming and our conforming to Jesus Christ. Okay, which is incredible. So God, so you know, being being set free by truth, okay, has to do with being free from the shackles of darkness and confusion. Okay, and that law of Moses, okay, that brought restrictions. Okay, that we are free to serve God, okay, at the altar of Christ and to abound in His fruit. Okay, that we are able to set our own pace for growth, okay, through our application of faith at the altar of Christ. So in verse, okay, also here in verse 5, when he talks about the ungodly, okay, and we talked about that before. He's talking about the fruitless ones. Okay, that's what being ungodly has to do with, being fruitless. Okay, so they may be religious leaders, okay, but they're fruitless. They're not bearing forth the fruit of faith. Okay, their souls do not possess the fruit of the Spirit. Okay, which has to do with substance which is from above. All right, they're not building with faith and charity, but they're tearing down with false knowledge and the tools of the world. Okay, they're tearing down uh, uh, the the bounds of truth. Okay, they don't want anything that restricts the imagination, so they tear that down. They attack truth. Okay, they speak evil of truth. Okay, they don't want to have anything to do with the priesthood. Okay, they don't want to see any purpose in tongues. Okay, they don't want to see any need for government. So they're tearing down. Okay, they're heaping destruction upon themselves, and they're building with the tools of the world, with finance, flattery, and fantasy. Okay, and they draw many after themselves. Okay, and even draw some of those who are new to the covenant. They may draw them away, trying to bring about sowing seeds of confusion and that sort of thing. Okay, uh, and and because and even though God allows that, okay, that is not a sanctified separation. Okay, so as you continue to work with truth, you understand what God is sanctified and what God is not sanctified. Then you're able to exercise your faith, okay, with knowledge and understanding, and abide within the framework of His covenant. Okay, working only with the Spirit of God. Okay, and God will continue to give you strength for faith and continuance. God will continue to sustain your faith. Okay, manifesting Himself to you, bringing about dreams and visions. Okay, is concerning His work within the soul, confirming this work, confirming this plan. Okay, this is what God does. This is the common experience of those that keep covenant with God. Right, that we are not simply sitting back with dead faith, trying to find ways to feel close to God, like I've heard people in the false religious system say. Okay, but as we exercise our faith with the tools of the priesthood, we're experiencing the presence of God daily. We don't have to try to feel close to God. We are close to God. We're abiding in Christ. Okay, you can't get any closer. Okay, well, until we're received back, to Him. Okay, with the with the third covenant, the baptism of light. Okay, but for now, okay, this is we are abiding in Christ, okay, in the sanctuary, working with the knowledge, the wisdom and the knowledge of God, which is from above. You can't get any closer. In verse 6, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, okay, and condemn them with an overthrow, making them an example to those that should live ungodly. Okay, being examples. So these people in these cities heard the gospel. Okay, the gospel was preached to them from Abraham and Melchizedek. Okay, they heard, they resisted, and they were judged as sinners. Okay, being grace resistors. God removed the righteous before the destruction. Okay, just as we said here in God knows how to deliver the just. Okay, God removed the righteous before the destruction, didn't he? He's doing the same thing before the seventh week, okay, which time is at hand. Okay, he does the same thing. He knows how to deliver the righteous, and God is again, okay, making known this gospel and truth. Okay, is concerning His plan. And just as I said, that Abraham and Melchizedek shared this knowledge with the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, but they resisted. Okay, they heard and they resisted, and they were judged as sinners. The same thing today. God has restored living apostles today. Okay, that this knowledge may be restored in truth. Okay, and all those who have ears will enter into covenant. Okay, those who resist will despise the covenant. They will despise the man and the method of God's choosing. Okay, and they will be preserved for destruction. Okay, and so verse 7, he goes on here and delivered just Lot. Okay, you might want to highlight the word just. Okay, it's been one of the elements of the gospel. Okay, I remember the a church that I was going to, that the pastor was using Lot as an example of a sinner. Okay, but God calls him just. Okay, those that are, who can condemn those who God has justified. Okay, and God calls him a righteous man. Okay, and Lot was delivered, okay, out of that city. So you see there's quite a bit of confusion with him. But when he talks about here is their filthy conversations of the wicked. Okay, he delivered just Lot, who was vexed with the filthy conversations of the wicked. Their principles lack good judgment, and they ruled according to the principles. Okay, and that was quite a vexation for Lot, who had to endure that. So, but he continued to work with faith. Okay, he continued to reflect upon that knowledge which God had revealed. Okay, as concerning the present covenant. Okay, with as concerning Abraham, and continued to walk by faith. Okay, leaning towards the counsel of God, not towards the counsel of the wicked. Um, And we says here that for that righteous man dwelling among them, okay, in seeing and hearing, he was not leaning towards their philosophies. He was not embracing their philosophies. Just because he was living amongst them did not mean that he was working with their philosophies. This is what a lot of people don't understand. Okay, it's the embracing of the philosophies, okay, that brings destruction. Okay, it's not proximity. So, so that righteous man dwelling among them, and seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. Okay, vexing his righteous souls, or in other words, the challenge of their principle was always evident, and it was very oppressing. Okay, the principle always oppresses and offends. Okay, it's very offensive. Okay, and he had to endure that, didn't he? Okay, same thing we have to endure. Okay, we live in a time of twofold darkness. Okay, where it's like every time I enter coming home, I have to drive by. There's two churches on the corner of where we live that you got to see their church signs every time you drive by them, and you got to deal with that. And they're always putting up something rather ridiculous on their sign, and you see that everywhere you go. You're just surrounded by these philosophies of the world. Okay, many of which are being framed and being presented as being Christian. Okay, you see that all the time, like on the news channels and all these different programs and everything else. They're trying to put up these philosophies which they call Christian, and they are trying to promote as being common Christian knowledge type of things. Okay, and yet they're filled with darkness, and they're full of corruption. They speak nothing of the covenant. They have no direction of faith in the covenant of Jesus Christ or the priesthood. Okay, no understanding of these things, and it's all continues to reflect that authorship of man. Okay, being the doctrines of men. Okay, it's just continue to address frailty. It's that same gospel, that themistic law. Okay, which simply brings upon the judgment of God. Okay, there's no deliverance in that knowledge. So in verse 9 he goes on, but the Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptations, and to reserve the unjust to the day of judgment to be punished. So you see there's a separation, isn't there? God makes distinction, and the distinction is by faith. Okay, it's by faith. He's not a respecter of persons. God examines faith. Okay, he tests the hearts. He examines faith, and he brings about a separation. So God does make distinction, doesn't he? Okay, there's the godly, and there's the ungodly or the unjust. Okay, in this case here. Okay, uh, those who are working with my spirit, and those who are working against my spirit. Those who are leaning towards my counsel, and those who are, embracing false knowledge and the philosophies of the world. Okay, so when he talks about delivering, he's talking about setting a scenario. Okay, same thing he does with each cycle of our growth. Okay, he sets a scenario for the testing of our hearts. Okay, but he also already, okay, even before our hearts are tested, okay, he prepares the reward. Okay, so he sets a scenario for our testing. He's already prepared for our reward. Okay, he is an expectation of the righteous. Okay, choosing faith. Okay, to continue to walk by faith. Okay, that he may reward us with an increase of fruit. Okay, and as we meet his expectations, okay, so does he deliver us from that, okay, and bring about that increase, that reward for our faith. And he talks about reserving here. Okay, again, you can draw a line back up from here to verse 3 if we didn't draw a line from verse 3 down here before, okay, to the word judgment, connect those. And he says here, as concerning the day of judgment, okay, reserving the unjust to the day of judgment to be punished, that has to do with a selected time. Okay, God has already selected the time of judgment for Satan. Right? Just because he is free to move about the earth at this time doesn't mean that God hasn't already selected a time of judgment for Satan. Right? He'll be bound. That at this time he's allowing him to be free. Okay, not completely free. Okay, but to walk about in order to sow confusion. Okay, for the testing of our hearts. Okay, there's a purpose to this. Okay, but there's a time also that he will be bound. Okay, and then there's a time that he'll be released again. Okay, at the end of the ninth week there. Okay, there's a purpose for that. Okay, but God's in control. Satan's not in control of that. God is in control of that. Okay, and this is where people become very confused. You hear a lot of people who profess themselves to be Christians who speak about a duality of power between Satan and God. Okay, they're very, very confused about that. Okay, but it's the same type of confusion that we were talking about here, and that we saw in that Psalm 73. Okay, that that they feel that Satan must have the upper hand, otherwise God would stop him. Why would God allow him, to do what he does if God was in control? Well, God is in control. Okay, and God allows that. Okay, so that they don't understand the difference between what God has authorized and what God has sanctified, and they don't understand the purpose. They don't understand the cycles of our growth. They don't understand the process which God has designated for our fruit bearing. Okay, or for us to know Him through that fruit bearing. Okay, because they're seeking to know God some other way. They're wanting to follow another record. They're wanting to be free to create for themselves their own doctrines. Okay, to privately interpret the scriptures. Okay, without government. Okay, not working with the grace of God. They want to try to piece together or sew together their own truths. Okay, which they'll talk about truths in plural. There's only one truth. All right, so in verse 10, let's go on in that. He says, but chiefly them that walk after the flesh in the lust of uncleanness and despise government, presumptuous are they, self-willed, and they are not afraid to speak evil of dignities. Which I've got a note here in connection with, verse 2, okay, was in reference to these. Okay, he says that many shall follow their pernicious ways, by reason of whom the way of truth shall be evil spoken of. Okay, so you might want to make note of that. Okay, these are chiefly them who walk after the flesh and the lust of uncleanness, despise government. Okay, presumptuous are they, self-willed, and not afraid to speak evil of dignities. Okay, the spirit and the soul is not being governed by the grace and truth of God. Okay, you do not see that the evidence of Christ working in them. Okay, that they feel very free to transgress and very free to be very very vocal and boisterous about their disagreement with truth. Okay, and despising government. Okay, not just seeing no need for government, but wanting to work against government. Right. Okay, so walking after the flesh, that has to do with working with the aspirations of man. Okay, this is what's directing them. They're not being directed by truth. They're not being directed by the wisdom of God. Okay, working with grace and truth. They're being directed by aspiration. That's what's ruling them. It's ruling their hearts. Okay, and the lust of uncleanness, that has to do with taking pleasure in sin. Okay, they're taking pleasure in sin. Now, sin has to do with the system of darkness. Okay, sin is a system. Sins is the fruit of that system. Okay, being the fruit of iniquity. Okay, but sin singular, okay, has to do with the system. Okay, they take pleasure in that system because in that system of darkness, okay, they are free to, work with a forte and to present themselves in any light that they see fit. Okay, they don't have to work within the bounds of the covenant, so they feel free to, say what they want, do what they want. Okay, and through the mystery of iniquity, they're able to present themselves as a honorable vessel. Okay, cleansing the outside of the vessel and presenting it in a certain light that people see, honor in that. Okay, and yet the inside of the vessel remains unclean. Okay, it has not been cleansed. Okay, the work of the Spirit's not taking place within. Okay, this is they take pleasure in that system that allows that to continue. Okay, that they can make merchandise of people. Okay, that they feel that they can prosper in their wickedness, and they like that. Okay, they take pleasure in that system. Okay, but like I said, God has set judgment against that. Okay, they are pursuing evil knowledge that pollutes the soul. Okay, and this has to do with that lust of uncleanness. Okay, that's not what they think they're doing. Okay, they don't think they're pursuing evil knowledge. Okay, but they are. That is what they're doing. From God's perspective, that's what they're doing. And they're presumptuous, which means they're open about it. Okay, they see nothing wrong in what they're doing at all. As a matter of fact, many of them feel that they're doing the will of God. Okay, and they'll tell you that they feel that they're doing the will of God. They feel that what they're doing is God's calling for their life. Okay, because they have examined their signature and seen what they're good at, and they're trying to make a connection between that and manifesting the glory of God. And so they feel that anything that they have a natural tendency to be able to do well, that they can glorify God in that. Okay, it's a great confusion. It's a great confusion. Okay, God cannot be glorified apart from the covenant of Jesus Christ. Okay, God would not accept praise outside of Christ. It says they that worship me must worship me in spirit and in truth. He will receive nothing short of Christ, nothing short of Christ, and that which bears the stain of the flesh. Okay, and reflecting Adam's signature. Okay, that which is reflecting Adam's signature, the natural, okay, of your heart, is an offense to God. Okay, God did not provide your signature for faith. So if you're trying to use your signature to please God, okay, you're offending God. It's a great offense to God. Okay, God provided Christ for pleasing Him. He said, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." Okay, He's pleased with nothing short of Christ. Therefore, you must lay hold of those things, okay, which Christ enters into. Okay, you must work with the sanctified contact points of His covenant, all right, in order for your faith to be received by God. Your faith has to meet God's expectations, okay, to be called righteous. Okay, God determines that, and Christ is that standard. Christ is the righteousness of God. He is that standard. Okay, that our faith has to meet. For your faith to be perfect, it must be joined to Christ, because it's Christ who sanctifies our faith. Okay, and all the things of this, all the contact points of His covenant are of the Spirit. They're not. There's nothing earthbound. It's all of the Spirit. Okay, therefore you must be engrafted with the Holy Spirit of God. Okay, and you must have this foundation knowledge of truth laid within your heart that you may serve Him. Okay, according to the terms that He set, and in so doing, you bear forth His fruit within the soul. So speaking evil, that has to do with throwing out the red flags, right? Those red flag people, they feel that they're like referees or something. They throw out the red flags to call those things which are of the Spirit, or the Spirit is working with. They call those things evil. Okay, those are all those people that wanted to shout objections, right? The same thing they did with Jesus. They were censoring Him, okay, in order to find things that they could use against Him. So they would go and they would act like they're listening to Him because they're interested in what He was sharing, but what they were actually doing was listening to Him so they could find things that they could use against Him. Okay, and they wanted those gotcha moments, right? Okay, they wanted to be able to throw out those red flags and call foul, right? And they wanted to be able to prove that the things which are being shared, by the Spirit in truth, okay, they wanted to be able to speak evil against those things. So that's what he's talking about, speaking evil. And we see that behavior taking place all the time in the false religious system. It's the same thing Jesus had to endure during his ministry, okay, in the first 8th week. Same thing we do today that we have to endure today in the second 8th week. It's the same thing, okay? And in fact, it's a twofold time of darkness now. It's a twofold time of darkness. And dignities, when he talks about dignities, okay, Moses, David, Jesus, the apostles, okay, those religious leaders who have established their own form of government uh, and their own system of support have always withstood the government of God. They've always done that. Okay, they despise the government of God because they've established their own form of government, and they don't want that challenged. Okay, the Pharisees, the Sadducees did it. Okay, it still happens today, right? Okay, he had Korah did that to Moses. Okay, you saw same thing with challenging David, Jesus, and the apostles. There's nothing different today, okay, than there was then. This is not new. Okay, but you must know the distinction between what God has authorized and what God has sanctified, and you must understand the purpose for God allowing the contradiction to exist, so that you may continue to remain focused upon Christ, working with the holy knowledge of God, exercising your faith with the sanctified tools of the priesthood, okay, that your soul may be saved and preserved in his care, okay, because this is the joy of the Father, and this makes sure that your joy is made full through fruit bearing. Amen.